Good morning, Kids Church. It's lovely to be with you again. I think the last time I did this, it was before the summer holidays, so I hope you've had a lovely summer holiday and time with your family. And I hope that the start back to school has gone well for you all and you've enjoyed the sunny weather this week. So, today we're going to be learning a little bit more about Moses. If you remember Vicky talking about Moses last week, we're going to continue learning about him. Before we do though, I've got one little thing to show you. I've got a candle, I'm going to light it. Okay, now when I light it, what will the fire, let's try that again. Second time, works. Now when I light it, what will happen to the candle? So if I leave it for a long time, what will happen to the candle? Can you see the wax dripping down? That's right, it burns up, doesn't it? So it gets smaller and smaller. Now this is just to remind you that there's something about a fire in our story. So watch out for it. Okay, so like I said, we've been talking about Moses last week and we're going to continue today. So we have got Moses in our story. Here he is. I'm going to take the candles away. And he was in the desert. If you remember rightly, he ran away, didn't he, at the end of the last story? He ran away because he didn't do something right. He did something wrong, didn't he? He hurt somebody else very badly and he had to run away. He did the wrong thing. So he ran away to a place called Midian and he was living in the desert. Now, can you imagine what it would be like to live in the desert? Yeah, you're right. Very, very dusty, very hot, very dry. Not a lot of place to find lots of water. So he was living in the desert, and he was in the story today. He was looking after his sheep. Okay, a little bit bigger than him, and he was looking after his sheep in the desert. Just a normal day, just looking after his sheep. Nice sunny hot day. Probably wondering what he was going to do for tea later. But do you know what? Something very strange happened. Kind of amazing when you think back at it, but something really, really strange happened. Out of nowhere, he saw a bush. But it just wasn't just an ordinary bush. This was a bush that was on fire. It was like a burning bush. So he went over to have a closer look. He left his sheep behind and he went over to have a closer look at this burning bush. And you wouldn't believe it, but there was a voice coming from the bush. And it was God calling his name, wanting to speak to him. So he couldn't see him physically, he could just hear his voice. And it said, Moses, Moses, here I am. And Moses said, here I am. Do not come any closer, God said. Take off your sandals, for the place that you walk and the place that you're standing on is holy ground. So he took off his sandals. And then he said, I am your God speaking to you. Now, Moses was kind of a little bit taken aback by this, so he hid his face. He hid his face, he just wasn't sure. He was afraid to look at God. And God gave a really important message to Moses. He gave him the message that he had seen how sad his people were in Egypt, because this is quite a while later now. So the people in Egypt, if you remember from Vicky's story, there were still lots of slaves in Egypt who were working really, really hard and being treated quite badly. And God still, even after all that time, still really cared for them and wanted to make sure that they were safe. And he had a special job for Moses to do. So he said to him that he'd seen how sad his people were still in Egypt and he'd heard them crying out to help, to be helped. And he said he cared so much about them. God said he cares so much about them that he needs Moses to help. And that God wants to rescue them, but he needs Moses as part of his plan. Now, Moses was really, really pleased to hear about this. He was like, yeah, this is great. I want Egypt to be saved as well. I want the Israelites to be saved from Pharaoh. But he wasn't too pleased what God was asking him to do. So he didn't like what God said next. Now, God said, now go. So leave your desert, leave the place that you feel quite comfortable in, and go back to Egypt. And he said, and God said, I'm sending you to Pharaoh to bring back the Israelites and to send them out of Egypt. So rescue them and take them away. Moses is thinking, how on earth am I going to do that? Why me, God? Why me? I'm not really the right person. And God said, don't worry, I'll be with you. And he said, no, who shall I say sent me? And he said, say to the Israelites, the Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob has sent me to you. And he said, but what if they don't believe me? They're not going to believe me. No one's going to believe me. And he said, show them these signs. So Moses had a stick. Take the burning bush away for a second. Moses had a stick and he used it to help him look after his sheep. And he said, throw your stick onto the floor and it will become something completely different. What do you think it became? What might slither around on the floor? That's right, a snake. So 1 minute it's a stick, the next minute it turned into a snake. Moses could not believe his eyes. And then God said, right, pick the snake up. Moses is thinking, I don't want to pick the snake up. But he did. And as soon as he did, it turned into the stick again. And God said, use this as a sign so that when you go and tell my people and tell Pharaoh that to let my people go, and when you tell the other people, they will believe you. They will know you're telling the truth. And this is a sign that I can do miraculous things. So turning the stick into a snake and back into a stick again. So that was one of God's signs that he used. But do you know what? Moses still had excuses, and he said, but do you know what? I'm not very good at speaking. I get all my words mixed up. I'm not really very good at speaking to other people. And God said, I will help you. No, please send someone else. He's saying, please don't send me. No, I'm not good enough. God had heard enough excuses by this point. He said, all right, your brother Aaron may go with you. I will help both of you to speak and to know what to do, but don't forget to take your stick, okay, so that people know that what you're saying is true, so you can show people the signs. At this point, I think Moses thought, do you know what? I've got to do what God says. I love him, I want to follow him, and I need to do what he says. So at this point he said, yes. So that was the burning bush. There was still that voice, and he said, I will do your will. So at this point it was time to go back to Egypt. So it was time to leave his comfortable place of living out in the desert, all calm, all peaceful, and it was time to go back to Egypt. So here he is with his stick. Now at this point there was a new Pharaoh, because it was many years later. Moses had grown up quite a bit from when he was last there, because do you remember he was born in Egypt and he had to run away. So there was a new Pharaoh, but the new Pharaoh was still treating the Israelites not very well at all. So Moses didn't need to be afraid of the old Pharaoh, because there was a new Pharaoh. So he took his wife and his sons and he put them on a donkey. So here's his wife and here's his children. And he took them back to Egypt. And do you remember who he brought? That's right, his brother Aaron. And they all went together as one family, ready to go back to Egypt and tell Pharaoh to let God's people go. And there you go, he's got his stick. So Moses told Aaron that God wanted them to be his messengers, and Aaron agreed. They told the leaders of the people, God has heard your prayers and is going to rescue you. So when we listen carefully to God's words, he can help us. And if we do what he says and we agree to what he says, then he will help us. Now, Moses wasn't really very happy with God's words at the beginning, was he? He was frightened, he was scared, and that's okay. That's a normal human feeling. But actually, he obeyed God and he did what he was asked to do. And he had the sign to help him. So I wonder what's going to happen next week in our story. It will be continuing with Moses, and I wonder what's going to happen next. You'll find out next week. So that's the end of our story today. But of course, I've got some questions for you just to see how well you've been listening. So I've got 3 questions for you. Okay, number 1. What did Moses see when he was in the desert, just looking after his sheep? What did he see? You remember? That's right. He saw a bush. But it wasn't any ordinary bush, was it? No, it was a burning bush. And the burning bush showed that it was God's voice. So it was a very, very out of this world, strange thing to see. And Moses was really shocked by it and amazed and couldn't believe that God was speaking to him through this. Okay, number 2. How did Moses feel about what God had asked him? Was he excited? Was he couldn't wait to get going? Or was he quite afraid? Yeah, you're right. He was feeling quite afraid, wasn't he? He was quite scared, and because of this, he had loads of excuses. I'm not good enough. I can't do this. No, you're talking to the wrong person. Actually, I can't speak very well. I'm not very good at speaking. And God every single time said, no, 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 I want you. I want you to go, and I'm going to help you. And that leads me on to my next question. So what sign was he told to use to show the people that he was telling the truth? What was he told to use? That's right. Yes, he was using, do you remember, his stick to use. And God told him that for people to believe in what God was saying and what Moses was saying through God, that this would turn into a snake. So he said every single time, throw it on the floor and it will become a snake. And then pick it back up and people will think, oh no, you can't pick a snake up. But then as soon as you do, it will turn straight back into the stick, so that you know that Moses was telling the truth and God had sent him on a mission. Okay, good work today, guys, Kids Church. It's been lovely to be with you again today, and I look forward to seeing you in not too long. I'm going to do a quick prayer before we leave today. Dear Lord, thank you so much that you care for us and that you love us so much, Lord. Just like you did for the people in Egypt, you cared so much that you sent Moses to help them out. And you're still the same God today, Lord. You care for us so deeply. And I pray that you would just be with us as we go about our daily lives at work and at home and at school. Amen. Okay, just before we go, I've got one more thing. If you go to your new books, we're looking at session 3 today. I've got Joshua's one, which is the younger one, but the older one will be session 3 as well. And it's called God Speaks to Moses. Have fun. See you soon.